In this video, we are going to solve linear equations. Okay, so these are going to be situations where we have an equal sign and we have an x, and we want to get it to be x equals some number. Okay, so here is the first example we're going to do together. So when doing these types of problems, we need to use what we learned about simplifying algebraic expressions to help us simplify each side of the equals, and then we will work on solving. So first thing I'm going to do is I need to get rid of these parentheses. So I'm going to distribute this positive 2 to both the 4x and the negative 3. So 2 times 4 gives me 8, and then I bring down the x. 2 times negative 3 gives me a negative 6. And then I'm going to bring down the negative 8, the equals 4 plus 2x. Okay. Now I want to look for any like terms that can be combined. So hopefully you notice you have a negative 6 and a negative 8. Okay. So we can combine that. So negative 6 minus 8 is going to give me a negative 14. And then I'm going to bring down the right side of my equation as is. Okay. Now, I've simplified both sides. Okay. And the reason I know that is because I have an x term on both sides, and then I have a number value on both sides. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to get my x's to one side and my numbers to the other. Okay, because then I can solve for x. So when solving, I personally always just move my x's to the left side. Okay, that's just something that I like to do. So to do that, I'm going to move my x's to the other side. So when I want to move something, I need to get rid of it from one side. So to get rid of a positive 2x, I'm going to subtract negative 2x because that goes away to 0. And now over here on the left, I can simplify. 8 minus 2 gives me 6x. I still have the minus 14 and then equals 4. Okay. So now I'm going to think about moving my number to the other side. Again, to move something to the other side of the equals, we do the opposite. So the opposite of a minus 14 is adding 14. Okay, and again, negative 14 plus 14 goes away to 0. So I'm going to be left with the 6x equals 4 plus 14 gives me 18. Okay. Now I have the point where I'm ready to solve for x. So 6x equals 18. Okay. You can think about this as 6 times x. So to get x by itself, I need to do the opposite of multiplication. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Okay. So I'm going to divide both sides of my equation by 6. Okay, because anytime I do multiplication or division, I have to do it to both sides. Okay, so I'm going to divide by 6. That leaves me with just an x. And then I'm going to simplify. 18 divided by 6 gives me 3. Okay, and that is solving a linear equation. Okay, you can always check your work when you do these types of problems. So to check, we can take my value x and I can plug it in. Okay, so instead of x, I'm going to plug in a 3. Four plus 2, and then again, instead of x, I'm plugging in a 3. Okay, and now we can verify that this equals is true. Okay, so I want to know, is that equals true? Okay, so I need you guys to grab your calculators. Okay, and I need you to type this into your calculator and then type this into your calculator. You could also do it in your head, but using your calculator is never a bad thing. Wherever I have parentheses written out is where you need to type parentheses into your calculator. Okay, so if you type the left side in, you should get positive 10. Okay, and then equals, if you type the right side in, you should get a positive 10. So notice we have 10 equals 10, which is true. Okay, so that checks out. So then we know that x does in fact equal 3. Okay, so that's how we can check using our calculator. Okay, so let's do some more examples. I went too far. All right, let's look at number 2. Okay, so this one looks very similar to the first example, except we have some distribution that has to happen on both sides of my equals before I can do any solving. So when I distribute here, I get 8x plus 4, and then I'm going to bring down that minus 29 equals 6x minus 15. Okay, so now again, I'm looking for anything that can be combined before I start solving. So I notice that I have a positive 4 and a negative 29 over here. So I'm going to go ahead and combine those. So I get 8x minus 25 equals 6x minus 15. Okay, and then again, I'm going to move x's to the left, numbers to the right. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 6x. Okay, so that will get rid of the 6x here. So 8 minus 6 gives me 2x. I've still got a negative 25 on the left, and then equals, I'm bringing down the negative 15. Okay, now be careful here because sometimes we get excited, we see the 15, we just write 15. So it's not just 15, it's a negative 15, so make sure you bring down that negative sign when you bring it down here. Okay, so next step is to move the 25 to the other side. So when I move that 25, I get 2x equals negative 15 plus 25 gives me a positive 10. Okay, now I'm one step away. Okay, I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. So when I divide by 2, I'm left with just an x on the left. Okay, and then 10 divided by 2 equals 5. Okay, and that is my answer for the second one. Okay, so use that second one as a guide to help you work through number 3. So your first step for this one would have been distributing. So careful when we distribute here is it's not just a 3 that we're distributing, it's a negative 3. Okay, this should have been what you got, okay, for this one. So after I distributed, I had a few things that could be grouped together. Okay, so notice I had on the left a negative 6 minus 17, which simplified to the negative 23. And then over here on the right, I have a 13 minus 6, which gave me this 7 right here. And then I still needed to bring down the minus 3x. Okay, then I moved my x's to the left by adding them to get rid of them on that right side. Okay, 2 plus 3 gives me 5x. Okay, I moved the negative 23 over by adding 23. That gave me 30. Okay, then to get x by itself, I divided both sides by 5, and I got x equals 6. Okay. So that is solving linear equations where we've got some distribution that needs to happen. Okay, we are now going to solve some equations that involve fractions. Okay, don't let the fractions scare you. All right, when we look at number 4, okay, we want to get to x. So we want to get to this. We want that to be by itself on that side of our equals. So if we think about getting that by itself, okay, we first want to deal with, if we think order of operations, we first want to deal with anything that's being multiplied or divided, okay, by that whole thing. So this whole x minus 6 is being divided by 5. So I need to deal with that before I can move the 6 over and get x by itself. So to deal with a fraction, I'm going to do the opposite here. So instead of dividing by 5, the opposite of dividing is multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply by 5, and actually I'm going to write this like this. Okay, so I'm just going to multiply this whole thing by 5. So that means I'm multiplying this side and this side of my equals by 5. So when I do that over here, I get 2 times 5 is equal to, and I'm going to write this out so you can see it. You don't need to write it out like this way, but I think the first time this will kind of help you see what's happening here. Okay, when we multiply this fraction by 5, okay, we're multiplying the 5 times the x minus 6. Okay. Here, anything divided by itself, okay, goes away to 1, and you're just going to be left with the x minus 6. So that's why we can just multiply by the denominator to get rid of the fraction, okay? But I'm totally good if you guys just jump to this step right here, okay, and go from here to here, okay? So in this step, the thing that we need to simplify is we need to simplify this multiplication. 2 times 5 gives me 10. That equals x minus 6. Okay, and now I'm one step away from my answer. I only have to do one thing to get x by itself. So I need to get rid of the negative 6. So to do that, I'm going to add 6. So that will give me 16 equals x. Okay, now I know having it number equals x sometimes freaks us out. So you can also write this as x equals 16. You can change that order that it's written, no problem. Okay, so that is number 4. Okay, now let's look at number 5. Okay, so this is a situation where we have 1/3 times t minus 5 is equal to negative 6. Now, our first instincts might be to distribute that 1/3 into the t and to the negative 5, but guys, that's going to make our life a lot easier because 1/3 times 5 gets messy. Okay. So does the 1/3 times t, okay? It means we're just going to have fractions, and we don't want to deal with those if we don't have to. So first step is to get rid of the fraction, okay? So notice, y'all, this is 1/3 times this. So the way we can get rid of multiplication is dividing by 1/3. So if I divide both sides by 1/3, my 1/3 is going to go away. I'm going to be left with the t minus 5 equals. And then you can use your calculator here to help you do this. So you can do negative 6, okay, divided by 1/3. And this is going to give you, I forgot my negative sign. Sorry, guys. Negative 18. Okay, so this is the answer, okay? Or, I'm sorry, not the answer, but that is how we can simplify this one, okay? So we can just divide by that fraction, and then we get our answer. And then we're one step away, okay? And that one step is to add 5 to get t by itself. So when we do that, we get t equals, and then negative 18 plus 5 is going to give me a negative 13 for my value for t. Okay, so that is number 5. I want you guys to know too that you also could have thought about it this way when solving. You could have said, okay, I want to get rid of the fraction, so to get rid of a fraction, I'm going to multiply by my denominator of 3, okay? And when I do that here, this is just going to leave me with t minus 5 equals negative 18. So you can think about this either way, okay? And I'm going to move this down just a little bit and draw a line, okay? So 2 kind of ways you could have thought about it when dealing with the fraction, okay? Multiplying by the denominator is going to work every single time in terms of getting rid of it. You also, when it's cleanly in front of the parentheses like that, you can also just divide by it on both sides. Either way works. So we are now going to do some problems that have multiple fractions. Okay, so those problems just had individual fractions happening. Now we're going to deal with problems where we have two plus fractions. Okay, so for this one, we have 3 fractions. Our steps for solving, okay, is going to help us get rid of the denominator so we can then solve. So once we can get rid of the denominator, it'll look like the first 2-3 examples we did. Okay, so to get rid of the denominator, we first have to find the number, okay, that all of our denominators divide into. So I want to figure out what number does 5, 3, and 2 divide into. So one way you can find this out, guys, is by doing 5 times 3 times 2, Okay, that'll give you 30. Okay, if you take the denominators, multiply them together, that number will always work. Okay, so another thing we want to think about is we want to figure out, is there a number smaller than 30? So what you can do is you can take, I say take your largest denominator, 5, and then just skip count. So do 5, what's 5 plus 5 gives you 10, plus another 5 gives you 15, plus another 5, plus another 5, up into 30, okay? And you can double check and see, does 3 or 2 go into any of these? So like 3 and 2 do not go into 5, they don't go into 10. 3 does divide into 15, but not 2, okay? So it gets marked off. 2 goes into 20, but not 3, so that one's not a good one. Neither go into 25, so 30 really is the smallest number, okay? Because the directions do say smallest, and that's just to keep your life easiest, okay? It doesn't have to be the smallest, but having smaller numbers typically means less mistake, okay? So we are going to multiply this whole thing by that least common factor, okay? So the least common factor between 5, 3, and 2, that means the smallest number that 5, 3, and 2 all divide into, which is 30. Okay, so we're going to multiply this equation by this number to eliminate the fraction. So when I multiply by 30, I need to multiply every part of my equation by 30. So the way this is going to look is like this. And I realized I wrote a plus sign instead of an equal sign. Okay, so that's what it looks like when we multiply each of these fractions by 30. Okay, just as a reminder, when we do multiplication by fractions, we can think of this as 30 over 1. Okay, and when you multiply two fractions, you just multiply across the top and the bottom. Okay, so when we're multiplying by 30, we're only multiplying the top of our fractions. Okay, now comes the important step where we simplify, okay? 30 divided by 5 is going to be 6, okay? So I can write this as 6 times 3x equals 30 divided by 3 is 10. So this becomes 10 times x plus 2. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So this becomes plus 15 times x minus 3, okay? And now that is exactly like those first few problems we did, okay? So we just need to here distribute, okay? And when we do that, we get 18x is equal to 10x plus 20 plus 15x minus 45, okay? So I'm going to combine like terms, okay? So I have a 10x and a plus 15x, and then I also have a plus 20 and a negative 45, okay? So when I combine here, I get 25x. Positive 20 minus 45 is going to give me a negative 25, okay? Now, to solve for x, which is, we're in step 3 now, we're in our simplifying and solving step, we need to move our x's to one side. So I'm going to move my x's over to the left. So that'll get rid of the 25x on the right. 18 minus 25 is going to give me a negative 7x, okay, equals a negative 25, okay. So now I'm one step away. Okay, all I have to do is divide both sides by a negative 7, and I get x equals, a negative divided by a negative becomes a positive, okay? But 25 divided by 7 is not a nice clean number, so we're going to leave it as a fraction, okay? You could also write this as a decimal. Let me see what it would be. It is approximately 3.57. Okay, and again, guys, I say approximately because I rounded there, okay? Anytime you round, you've now approximated the value, okay? So that's why fractions are better, okay? Because there's no rounding involved, okay? It's an exact value. So I like the answer of 25 over 7 a lot better than I like a decimal value, okay? Your homework is going to be specific about what they want and how they want the answer. Okay, so just pay attention to those directions. So that is solving linear equations where you have multiple fractions. Okay, so we're going to do one more together, and then you guys are going to try one on your own. So for this one, before we work it out, I want you to think to yourself and figure out what that least common factor that 4, 6, and 2 all divide into. Okay. So for 4, 6, and 2, okay, our least common factor, so again, it's the number that they all divide into, that's the smallest, is actually just going to be, oh, not 6, sorry, is going to be 12. Okay, so if you ever get stuck, okay, and you're not sure, you can take the largest number, so in this case it's 6, okay, and then again, like I had said in the previous one, just start adding 6, okay, do it a few times, and then start crossing things off. Okay, 4 doesn't go into 6. Okay, so this one doesn't work because 4 doesn't go into it. The next number that 6 is divisible by, 4 goes into 12, and then so does 2, so that one works. Okay, so that's one method of finding the least common factor that will work every single time. So we are now going to multiply this whole thing by 12. Okay, and when I do that, okay, I get this. Okay, so I want you guys to take a second. I want you to try to simplify this on your own. Okay, so simplify those fractions and give me kind of what comes next in that next step once we've simplified our fractions. When you did this, you should have seen that 12 divided by 4 gives you 3. So this would have been 3 times 2x minus 1. This would have simplified to a 2. So don't forget about that negative sign. Bring that negative sign down. Okay. And then 12 divided by 2 would have given you 6x. Okay. So that is that one. Okay. Now I want you guys to distribute here, and I want you to solve for x. Oh man, I don't know what my iPad is doing. Okay, so when we distribute here, we get 6x minus 3 minus 2x plus 4 equals 6x. Okay. We can combine like terms, so we've got a 6x minus 2x, and then a negative 3 and a positive 4 that can be combined. So this would give us 4x plus 1 equals 6x. Now, I usually say x is to the left, numbers to the right, but I already have a number on the left and I don't have any numbers on the right. So I'm going to leave that 1 there, and I'm going to move my x over to the other side because I'm just thinking as few steps as possible because I just want to be efficient. Okay, so 6 minus 4 gives me 2x, and then I divide both sides by 2, so I get x equals 1/2 as my final answer. Okay, so that is number 7. Okay, I want you guys to try this one on your own. Okay, I am going to give you guys a hint. Whatever you multiply by, so whatever that value is that you come up with, you need to multiply it by everything. Okay, so when I say everything, I mean every fraction and the 2x. Okay, so you can't just like leave the 2x out there and not multiply by that least common factor. Okay, multiply the 2x as well. So that's my hint. Okay, see what you can come up with for this one. It's a little bit of a challenge. See if you can do it. Okay, so for this one, the number that you should have multiplied by was 14. Okay, so for this one, our least common factor, okay, was just 7 times 2, which is 14. Okay, so when we multiply by that, we get 28x minus 2 times 2x equals 7x plus 7 times 17. Okay, when you distribute out and you start solving, you end up with 17x equals 119. Divide both sides by 17, and you get x equals 7 as your final answer. Okay. So let me know what questions you guys have. If anything didn't make sense, or if anything is giving you trouble with the homework.